The idea to hang out at the bowling alley where I worked came about as a joke. My friends and I had been looking for something different to do, and I thought, why not? I'd worked at Pinnacle Lanes for years, and the place was basically my second home. So one Friday night, we gathered our gear and headed over after hours, keys in hand. The air inside was still and musty, the familiar smell of polished lanes and shoe disinfectant greeting us as we flicked on the lights. We were just looking to have a good time, bowling a few frames, sharing some laughs, and maybe even having a couple of beers. It was weird being there without the usual bustle of families and league players, but the silence was kind of nice. Everything was going smoothly. We were on our third game, and the competition was getting heated. My buddy Dave had just bowled a strike, and we were all giving him grief about his victory dance when we heard it. A low, rumbling sound. The kind of noise that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. We all turned toward lane 7, where the sound seemed to be coming from. The ball return had activated, and a single ball slowly rolled up the chute and settled into the rack. No one had bowled it. We just stared at it, bewildered. Probably just a glitch, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The others nodded, but their faces showed they weren't convinced. We went back to our game, but the atmosphere had changed. A few frames later, it happened again. This time, 2 balls came up the return. The unsettling thing was that they weren't even the same type. One was an old, beat-up house ball, and the other was a custom ball with a skull design that none of us recognized. Dave was the first to speak up. "Okay, this is starting to get creepy." I nodded, trying to mask my own discomfort. "Maybe there's something stuck in the mechanism. I'll go check it out." As I approached lane 7, the sound of my footsteps echoed off the polished floors. The back of the alley, where the pin setters were, had always been a bit eerie. The machines clattered and hummed as they cycled through their routines. But tonight, the noise seemed more sinister. I reached the pin setter for lane 7 and shone my flashlight inside. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. I was about to turn back when I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. Something darted between the lanes, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. "Hey, is anyone back here?" I called out, hoping to hear a response. Instead, the only sound was the low hum of the machines. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. As I rejoined my friends, I saw their worried faces. "Did you find anything?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Nothing. Let's just finish this game and get out of here." We resumed playing, but our fun had been replaced by a tense silence. It felt like the alley was watching us, waiting. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a loud bang, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone, or something, scuttling away. The ball from lane 7 rolled onto the floor and stopped at our feet. "Okay, that's it. I'm done," Sarah said, grabbing her bag. Just as we were about to leave, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. We stood frozen, our breaths shallow, ears straining for any sound. Then, a faint rustling. Footsteps, shuffling closer. "Who's there?" Dave yelled into the darkness. No answer. A beam of light cut through the black as I turned on my flashlight. The beam caught a figure slouched against the wall. A man, his clothes tattered and dirty, his eyes wide and wild. A homeless man who had been hiding out in the alley. You shouldn't be here," he muttered, his voice raspy. "It's not safe." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, though my voice shook. "They don't like visitors," he whispered, his eyes darting around. "They only come out when it's dark." As if on cue, the lights flickered back on. The man flinched, covering his eyes, and then he bolted, disappearing into the maze of lanes and pin setters. We didn't wait to find out what he meant. We grabbed our stuff and left as fast as we could, not stopping until we were outside, gulping in the cool night air. To this day, I don't know what he was talking about, or what was really going on in that alley. We never went back after dark again, and I eventually quit my job there. Every now and then, I still think about that night, and it sends a shiver down my spine. Maybe he was just a crazy guy. Or maybe there really was something there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the lights to go out. I met her at the bowling alley, one of those old-school places where the neon lights barely worked, and the smell of fried food clung to the air like a bad memory. I'd been going there for years, ever since I was a kid. The pins crashing down, the satisfying weight of the ball in my hand. It was my escape. She was new, working the counter on Friday nights. Her name tag read Sam, and she had a way of smiling that made you forget about the grime and the noise. We chatted a bit every time I came in. It was small talk at first, then a little more personal. I found out she loved horror movies and had a cat named Whiskers, who apparently thought it was a dog. One night, as I was leaving, she slipped me a piece of paper with her number on it. "Call me," she said, her smile widening. "Let's hang out sometime." A week later, she asked me out, at the same bowling alley, but after closing. "It'll be fun," she insisted. "We'll have the whole place to ourselves." I showed up a little before midnight. The parking lot was deserted, the neon sign flickering. Sam was waiting inside, leaning on the counter, her smile still there but different somehow. Almost secretive. We bowled a few frames, laughing and talking. It was surreal being there with just her, the sounds of the pins echoing louder than usual. As the night went on, things started to feel off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to stretch and move in the dim light, or the strange noises coming from the back rooms. "Want a drink?" Sam asked suddenly, breaking my train of thought. She disappeared behind the counter and returned with 2 cans of beer. We toasted to the night and to our new friendship. The beer was warm and tasted a bit off, but I didn't mention it. As we played, I noticed the lanes on either side of us remained dark. I thought it was odd, considering the lights usually stayed on all night. "Is it just us?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just us," she confirmed, her eyes glinting in the half-light. It was around 1 a.m. when things got really weird. The pins at the end of the lane started resetting themselves, but not in the usual mechanical way. They moved slowly, deliberately, almost like someone, or something, was setting them up by hand. I mentioned it to Sam, but she just laughed it off, saying the place had always been a bit haunted. Haunted? I tried to laugh with her, but my voice cracked. "Yeah, old story. Probably just the wind or something." She shrugged, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match her nonchalance. I shook it off and bowled another frame. But the feeling of unease grew. At one point, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing at the far end of the alley, just beyond the reach of the lights. When I looked again, it was gone. "I need to use the restroom," I said, more to break the growing tension than anything. Sam nodded, watching me with that same secretive smile. The restroom was cold and smelled faintly of mildew. As I washed my hands, the lights flickered and then went out completely. Panic rose in my chest. I fumbled for my phone, using its light to guide me back to the door. When I opened it, the hallway was dark too. "Sam?" I called out, but my voice echoed back at me, empty. I made my way back to the main area, the only sound being the soft thud of my footsteps on the worn carpet. The bowling alley felt different. Wrong. I could hear pins falling, but it was a slow, irregular sound, like someone was picking them up and dropping them one by one. "Sam?" I called again, my voice trembling. She appeared from behind the counter, but her smile was gone. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice unusually flat. "The lights went out in the restroom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Happens sometimes," she replied, but her eyes flicked to something behind me. I turned and saw nothing but the darkened lanes. When I turned back, she was closer, her expression unreadable. "Maybe we should call it a night," I suggested. "Don't you want to finish our game?" she asked, her tone almost pleading. "I think I've had enough for tonight," I said, edging toward the exit. She didn't follow. Instead, she just stood there, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Suit yourself," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I left quickly, the door slamming shut behind me. As I walked to my car, I glanced back at the bowling alley. Sam was standing at the window, her face illuminated by the flickering neon sign. She didn't wave or smile, just watched as I drove away. I never went back. I told myself it was just a weird night, that there was a rational explanation for everything. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I started having nightmares about that night, about the figure at the end of the lane, about Sam's eyes watching me in the dark. Then a few weeks later, I heard the news. The bowling alley had burned down, an electrical fire, they said. No one was hurt, but the place was a total loss. I tried to find out what happened to Sam, but no one seemed to know. It was like she'd never existed. I even went to the spot where the alley had been, but there was nothing left but charred rubble and the faint smell of smoke. Sometimes, late at night, I think about calling her number, just to see if she'll answer. But I'm too scared of what I might hear on the other end of the line. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see her standing there, smiling that secretive smile, watching me as I drive away into the night. The first time I saw him, he was just a figure at the far end of the bowling alley. Every Friday night, my friends and I would hit the lanes, laughing and teasing each other about our terrible scores. Bowling was our thing, a way to unwind after a week of school. But he was always there, hunched over his own game, never speaking to anyone. He was ancient, or at least he looked it, with a weathered face and sunken eyes that seemed to watch everything and everyone. I didn't pay him much mind at first. Why would I? He was just some old guy who liked to bowl alone. One Friday, after a particularly brutal game where I'd barely broken 100, he approached us. His voice was gravelly, like he'd been smoking since the dawn of time. "Need some tips, kids?" he asked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes spreading across his face. My friends and I exchanged glances. It was weird, sure, but we were polite. Sure," I said, trying not to sound too awkward. He showed us how to adjust our grip, how to aim, and soon, we were all doing better than ever before. It felt good. We even started to look forward to his advice each week. But as the weeks went by, things got strange. I'd catch him watching us, even when he wasn't giving us tips, just standing there, his eyes following our every move. It gave me the creeps, but no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and just didn't want to talk about it. One night, after we'd all left the alley, I realized I'd forgotten my jacket. I ran back in, and there he was, standing in the middle of the empty lanes, staring at the pins as if he could knock them down with his mind. When he noticed me, he smiled that same unsettling smile. "Forgot something?" he asked. I grabbed my jacket and mumbled a quick thanks, hurrying out of there. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me, even when we weren't at the alley. I'd see him in my mind, those piercing eyes watching, waiting. My friends stopped going, saying they had better things to do or just making excuses. I think the old man was getting to them too. One night, I decided to walk home alone. It wasn't far, and I figured some fresh air would do me good. I was about halfway home when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I thought it was just someone else out for a late-night stroll, but the steps grew quicker, matching my pace. I glanced back, and there he was, the old man, a dark silhouette in the dim streetlight. I sped up, my heart pounding. So did he. Panic set in. I broke into a run, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. I didn't dare look back again. I could feel him closing in, his presence a heavy weight on my back. Just as I reached the alley that led to my street, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I twisted, adrenaline surging through me, and broke free, sprinting down the alley as fast as I could. I could hear him cursing behind me, his footsteps fading as I ran. I burst into my house, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My parents looked up, alarmed, but I couldn't explain. How could I tell them that the old man from the bowling alley had followed me, tried to grab me? They'd never believe it. That night I barely slept, every creak of the house making me jump. The next day I told my friends, but they just laughed it off, saying I must have imagined it. But I knew what I felt, what I saw. I stopped going to the bowling alley after that. We all did. Life moved on, but I never forgot those eyes, that smile. Sometimes, when I'm out late, I still feel like I'm being watched, like he's still out there, waiting. A few weeks ago, I heard about a disappearance. A kid from our school, someone who used to bowl with us. They said he was last seen near the alley. I can't help but wonder if the old man had something to do with it. But no one believes in ghosts or monsters anymore. I haven't seen him since that night, but sometimes, in the dark, I swear I can hear those footsteps behind me, feel that hand reaching out. Maybe one day he'll come back for me. Or maybe he's just waiting, watching.